A pleasant good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Yusei Z. Adams, the Acting Communications Officer within the Office of the Deputy Governor and the Governor's Group. This morning, His Excellency the Governor, Mr. Daniel Pruce, will deliver an update on the implementation of the Commission of Inquiry's recommendations as well as the security of the territory. Following his remarks, His Excellency will then take questions from the members of the media. Journalists are reminded that you are allowed 2 questions, after which you will be allowed further questions once all media houses present have been given the opportunity to speak. Once again, welcome to this morning's press conference. His Excellency the Governor, Mr. Daniel Pruce, will deliver remarks on the implementation of the Commission of Inquiry's recommendations and the security of the territory. Please welcome His Excellency the Governor.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good morning, everyone, those joining us virtually and also colleagues here in the room. It's good to see you all. Thank you very much for coming along this morning. I just wanted to cover a few things in my opening remarks, both the Commission of Inquiry, the Law Enforcement Review, 1 or 2 other matters, and then we'll be very happy to take your questions or comments while we're all here together. So, good morning, everyone. Let me start with the Commission of Inquiry and say a few words about that. As you know, today I'm publishing my final review of the COI. So the Commission of Inquiry took place between 2021 and 2022 and reported on the 4th of April 2022. Over the past 3 years, public officers, elected representatives, and the Governor's office, my own office, have been working together to deliver the 48 recommendations contained within that report. During his visit to the Virgin Islands on November 2024, the Minister for the Overseas Territories, Stephen Doughty, called for a final review by the Governor, a self-assessment by the government of the Virgin Islands, assessment by Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office officials, and public feedback on the reforms. So the government's self-assessment was laid in the House of Assembly earlier this week, and today, this morning, now, I published my final review and the public feedback report. At the time of my last quarterly review, that was just 1 week before the deadline we were working towards back in May 2024. At that stage, 19 of the 48 recommendations were outstanding. Significant work took place over the following months to complete the remaining recommendations. 2 recommendations have been delayed due to external factors beyond our control, and that's been known for some time. Those were the new criminal procedure rules, which are being developed under the supervision of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court across the ECSC's jurisdiction, and judge-only criminal trials, which will be considered as part of the forthcoming negotiations on a new constitution within the Virgin Islands. So that leaves another 3. The situation with those 3 is as follows. So the Immigration and Passport Act required some further amendment to address a few issues with the legislation that was passed last year. I was delighted to take delivery of that amendment just in the past couple of days, and I've now assented to it. Of course, that now needs to be brought into force. Separately, I assented to the Public Assistance Amendment Act 2024 last August, so some time ago. That has yet to be brought into force. The Ministry advises that they are working hard on regulations to underpin the new law, so progress is underway. And then the third of the 3 I just wanted to mention related to vetting. And I was very pleased to hear that the Acting Commissioner of Police launched vetting for officers of the RVIPF yesterday, which is an excellent step forward. Further work remains to be done before we can also commence vetting of customs, immigration and prison officers. But again, progress is underway in that regard, and I'll say a little bit more about that later. Since the COI report was published, 18 pieces of legislation relating to the delivery of reforms has passed through the House of Assembly. 13 of these laws were passed between May 2024 and September 2024. So that was a particularly intensive period which followed my last quarterly review. Once laws are brought into force, the key priority now, in most areas, is the development of comprehensive policies and procedures which align with the legislation. These policies, of course, must be accessible to the public and must also be consistently applied. And to enable that, resources and training are also needed. So we are yet to fully deliver the objectives of the Commission of Inquiry reforms, which are ultimately intended to improve the lives of people in the Virgin Islands. And in large part, that's because the laws which establish the institutions and ways of working are themselves in their infancy. On the 9th of April, Cabinet agreed a governance reform implementation action plan which describes the steps for implementing reforms so that they result in meaningful, practical, real-world benefits. This process, of course, will need to be closely monitored and owned by the government of the Virgin Islands. As we've discussed previously, the decision concerning the Ordering Council and whether to lift the Ordering Council sits with the Minister for the Overseas Territories, Stephen Doughty, and also the UK's Foreign Secretary, David Lammy. It's not for me to prejudge what that decision might be. This report, the report I'm presenting to you today, is my best effort to present an accurate assessment of all the work that's gone into delivering the COI recommendations. I should also add at this time, as you'll see in the report, I do not judge that additional powers for the Governor are necessary. More generally, I just reflect that it's evident from this process that I've been heavily involved in for the past year and a half now, it's evident that the closer we work together, the more we achieve. And I'm very much of the view, from my lived experience, that a genuine partnership based on trust and mutual understanding is the most effective way of ensuring that the aspirations of the COI reforms can be achieved. Let me just add that in addition to my final review, the findings of the public feedback exercise, which ran between the 12th of February to the 2nd of March this year, are also being published today. The response to that survey was encouraging. Over 600 people shared their views. The thoughtful and considered comments of those who participated represented a wide cross-section of society, and I'm extremely grateful to everyone who took the time and the trouble to respond. While it may be too early to draw reliable conclusions, and still more can be done to improve the experiences of residents, the findings already provide enough indication to give confidence that governance is moving in the right direction in several areas. And the public feedback also provides evidence for the importance of moving towards more public education and a particular continuing sustained focus on implementation. That's what I'd like to say at this stage in relation to the Commission of Inquiry. As I say, I'm very happy to take questions on that from colleagues from the media in the room here. But while I have the floor, let me also say a few words about the law enforcement review. As colleagues will be aware, last month the second part of the review of law enforcement here in the Virgin Islands was published. As many of you know, the review was conducted by His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary, Fire and Rescue Services. This is an independent body which operates independently in the UK. And its role is to conduct precisely this sort of review and examination of police, fire and rescue services across the board. There's been a lot of discussion around the findings of that review, and that's understandable. It's an ambitious and far-reaching roadmap for change, with the intention of making the territory safer over the next decade and beyond. It recommends improvements designed to optimise and to support law enforcement agencies in performing their duties. This is a thorough piece of work which gives us a body of analysis that deserves serious and considered study and discussion. And collaboration will be at the heart of this. To succeed, we must take a proactive, integrated approach to tackling crime, including organised crime and the violence that gangs sadly proliferate. So I look forward to working with the Premier, the National Security Council, all law enforcement agencies, all criminal justice partners, all partners across government and beyond that can help us in this undertaking. As we all know, the first duty of any government is the safety and security of its citizens. By improving the governance and oversight of law enforcement agencies, we will be better equipped to tackle crime, including international organised crime, better able to protect our borders, better equipped to halt the flow of illicit finance, to make the criminal justice system more efficient and to protect vulnerable people, while also safeguarding fundamental rights and freedoms. I'm grateful to the UK government for funding the review and helping resource the programme which will support the implementation of these recommendations, of experts from the United Kingdom recruited to help work with key agencies to help develop those implementation plans. And then finally, just before I open up the floor, perhaps I could just say a few words about police vetting. I touched on this earlier, and it's relevant to both the COI and the law enforcement review, and of course has been a topical issue for some time. Starting point to all of this, of course, is building effective law enforcement agencies, and that's based on trust. Trust from the public, trust across the agencies, and trust between colleagues. The Commission of Inquiry itself heard that there was, and I quote, a reluctance to share intelligence for fear of it being divulged. As a consequence, the COI recommended that law enforcement officers should be subject to vetting. We've been working on this for some time since then, and I was pleased, as I said earlier, to hear that the Acting Commissioner launched vetting for members of the RVIPF yesterday. And we're continuing to work towards progress to start the process of vetting for customs, immigration and prison officers. As we've gone through this journey, I've worked very closely with the Attorney General and her chambers every step of the way. And this work, of course, has been guided by a firm commitment to upholding the Constitution of the Virgin Islands and being consistent with it. Of course, it's critically important that people undergoing vetting are provided with the necessary information, and that those who are conducting the vetting process are also provided with complete information. The form that officers are required to fill out is available within the regulations. Officers are asked to disclose information about their personal circumstances, circumstances which could make them vulnerable, which could place them at risk, which could inhibit their ability to do their job effectively. And part of this is also identifying associations and connections that officers may have as well. Understanding officers' finances is an important part of this process too. But let me just clarify one point which I think has been widely misunderstood. At no stage in the vetting process will anyone be required to disclose the PIN numbers of their credit cards. I know vetting can feel intrusive, particularly when it's new. In common with many of my UK civil service, diplomatic service colleagues, I have undergone vetting processes throughout my career. But it's important that we share information with our employers so that they can help support us in managing any risks appropriately, mitigating any potential vulnerabilities. And those requirements flow from the work that we do. So let me conclude just by reflecting that all of these things join together: security, good governance, underpin prosperity. And we all want to see the Virgin Islands flourish. So I look forward to continuing to make my contribution and working together with all partners collaboratively to ensure that the safety, the security, and the prosperity of our community prospers. Thank you. So with that, I'm very happy to take questions from colleagues in the room or elsewhere, if that's technically possible. I just ask colleagues taking the floor to perhaps identify themselves for the benefit of our wider audience. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I'll take questions from the media.
Good morning again. Cindy Roseanne, Guavaberry Media.
Morning.
My first question. It has been a norm that the governor and the premier address the public on the COI updates. There are 2 press conferences today. Do you find it problematic or offensive in any way that you update the people before the elected government has a chance to do so?
Thank you, Cindy. Thanks for that question. So I think during my time here, we've taken a number of approaches to briefing the wider public about COI. The last report that I gave in May of last year, I recall that was a press conference I gave by myself. I think the Premier also gave a separate press conference around that time as well. Equally, there have been other occasions where we've spoken to the public jointly about particular issues of shared concern. So I don't think there's any set template or standard approach for doing this. Today, we convened the opportunity to meet with friends from the media so that we could discuss the review that I'm submitting. I'm very happy to see you here and delighted to take your and others' questions. And if the Premier has arranged a press conference, then that's absolutely fine. I wouldn't read anything into that, because I think over the years, the way in which we've approached these public moments has varied, sometimes jointly, sometimes separately.
So there's no tension there?
No, not at all.
Okay. I may have missed it, so don't make this one of the questions, but did you refer to the lifting of the order in council?
In my opening remarks, yes.
Okay. Can you just repeat what it was? It was left for the minister?
So yes, so the decision in relation to the ordering council will be a decision that sits with the Minister for Overseas Territories, Stephen Doughty, and the Foreign Secretary in the United Kingdom, David Lammy. And that's their judgment, that's their discretion. My role is to submit, as I'm doing today, as accurate and factual and representative a report of where we are as is possible, to enable them to make that judgment. And as I explained in my introduction, it's one of a number of components which will be before them. So you have my report, you have the self-assessment from the government of the Virgin Islands, you have the public feedback exercise, the results of that, which I'm also publishing this morning. They're now available online, as well as inputs from officials from the UK that have visited here in recent months.
Thank you. Is there an update or status on the pending criminal investigations that were brought forward by the COI?
Thank you. Well, I think, as you know, and as we've said previously, investigations that are still ongoing. It's not appropriate for me to comment on those. So if and when those investigations reach a time where there will be a public intervention, that will be made, but it's not for me to make today.
Okay. The Premier indicated that the House of Assembly members would be writing to you with their areas of disagreement on the review for law enforcement. Have you received such a letter?
Thank you. Yes, so that reached my desk yesterday. So I've just received it. So I will obviously consider it, digest it, give it due and serious attention, and then follow that up appropriately. But yes, I can confirm it's safely received.
Okay, so I guess you'll have to take a look at that, but have you thought about, because there are some concerns that have been made publicly, so have you thought about how you would approach the concerns, particularly the concerns of the territory in terms of the closure of some of the sister island borders?
So I think that's a totally fair question, and it does build on the commentary that has been in some of the public discussion. I think I'd come back to the approach I outlined in my opening statements. We have a very rich piece of work that's been presented to us, researched over an extended period, containing 375 recommendations, which are very broad-ranging. Some of them are simple, straightforward, practical in terms of implementation. Others, of course, more complex, more sensitive, will require deeper political and perhaps constitutional discussion. From my perspective, the job that presents itself now is working with Premier, local elected government, all partners, to go through those recommendations systematically, seriously, calmly, to identify how we can progress, where we can progress, and some will be more straightforward than others. So we're still in the early stages of this process. We still have a body of information that we need to properly digest and give due credit and attention to. And for me, that's the next step in this process.
Thank you.
Okay.
We'll allow the other members
Sure.
to get their
Thank you.
questions.
Colleagues.
Good morning, Mr. Governor. In the conclusion, sorry.
Yeah.
Sean Connolly, business editor of the BVI Beacon.
Hello, Sean.
Thank you. In your conclusions, you state that you don't want to prejudge Minister Doughty's decision on direct rule, the Order in Council, and you state, I do not judge that additional powers for the Governor are necessary at this time. But surely you're the Foreign Office's top man in the territory. They must have sought or are seeking your recommendation on direct rule. Have you given it yet? When will you give it, and what will it be?
Thank you, Sean. Thanks for the question. And just to be very clear on my role in this process, as has been the case since the outset, my duty in terms of the Governor's contribution to the Commission of Inquiry is obviously taking forward my responsibility for those areas of delivery that sit within my remit. And we've updated on those in this report and others. Equally, it's my duty, as defined at the very start of this process, to provide regular reports which assess progress across the board. As we've gone through the past 12 months or so, that rhythm has been slightly disrupted as we've looked at new extensions, we've had further discussions. The last one was May 24. I'm standing before you today with the final report, which the Minister commissioned from me some months ago. So what it presents is my best assessment from my vantage point of where we stand across the board. It will be for the Minister, and I'm sure the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, to then interpret this information alongside the other inputs they will have, as I mentioned earlier, to then exercise their judgment, and it's a ministerial judgment in terms of the Order in Council. On the question of additional powers, that is something that was raised in a previous Governor's report before my arrival, and one which I commented upon back in May 24, and which I think is appropriate for me to comment on again today. And there's no ambiguity. I'm making my views clear in the report and in the comments I've given to you that at this stage I see no basis for additional powers for the governor. But again, these are decisions which sit with our elected representatives in the United Kingdom, Minister Doughty, Secretary of State Lammy.
Okay, but as I said, you're their eyes and ears on the ground. So what is your recommendation to them regarding whether the threat of direct rule should be lifted by the end of June or not?
Yeah, but that's not the way the process is working, Sean. I mean, just to clarify, I'm standing before you as governor of the Virgin Islands. My duty within this process is to provide a full and objective assessment, as I've endeavoured to do, and obviously it's there, it's in the public domain, it's for discussion and interpretation by colleagues across the territory and beyond. And that's my responsibility, and it's one that I'm fulfilling.
So are you trying to say that they haven't asked for your recommendation on this crucial issue?
What they've required from me is what I'm publishing this morning, which is the report which sets out where we are in this process. It provides my view in relation to the specific point of additional powers. It provides a summary, with my interpretation of progress so far, and that's in the text. You'll see it as you come to read it. But, these important issues, and you're right to highlight the question of the Ordering Council, because that is a critical aspect of this process and is one that's been much debated since its inception. That's a decision that sits with ministers.
My second question, as part of the COA reforms, senior public officers have to register their interests in a private register. Has that taken effect yet? And do you believe it's right that the public officer, the public officer register should be private, as your predecessor, Mr. Rankin, asked the House of Assembly before he left to widen public access to it?
So, in terms of the register of interests, again, others will be closer to the detail, but that register does exist. Public officers have had an opportunity, in line with the new arrangements, to provide details to that register. In terms of the levels of access, I know that's been an issue under discussion for some time as we've gone through the process, but I took great encouragement from my visit to the register and my discussions with the registrar, who's been recently newly appointed, that we now have in place, a good and effective basis within which interests that are a matter of public interest, which are relevant to the exercise of the responsibilities of public officers and others, can now be properly recorded.
You're the highest-ranking public officer. You're the highest-ranking. Well, this is part of that question. You're the highest-ranking public officer in the territory. Will you have to register your interests like other senior public officers? If not, why not?
Thank you. Thank you, Sean. And I'm very happy to take the extra question, Mr. Adams, but thank you for your intervention. So again, this comes down to the situation of the governor and the nature under which the post is established and I'm appointed. I'm subject to all the provisions that would apply to a British civil servant and a member of the British diplomatic service. So in terms of vetting, example we've discussed earlier, in terms of conflicts of interest, in terms of registering anything that could conflict with my role or responsibility, I'm subject to all of the very robust provisions that are exercised by the British government over a British public servant, which is what I am.
So you won't be bound by this register then for the Virgin Islands register?
So arrangements which are still more demanding and still more stretching apply to me as a British public officer.
Isn't that double standards?
No, it just reflects the different status of this role and the nature of my appointment. As you know, I am the governor of the Virgin Islands, but I'm also a member of the British diplomatic service and a British civil servant.
Okay.
And so within the well-established framework that ensure integrity and accountability to that cohort, that's where my duty of reporting lies.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
Good morning, everyone. Kathy Richards, JTV News.
Morning, Kathy.
We meet again in a very short space of time, Governor. My question to you, you have expressed very eloquently your satisfaction of a number of areas as it relates to the implementation of the Commission of Inquiry report. Could you weigh your satisfaction as opposed to your dissatisfaction? And if you have a number of dissatisfaction, could you shed some light on those areas?
Thanks, Kathy. I think, there's a balance to be struck, isn't there, between trying to draw conclusions in terms of what's more important here and less important over there, which is more of a priority and which is less of a priority. And obviously the duty that's on my shoulders in this process is to provide an objective assessment. And that's what I've sought to do through the presentation of the material that you have before you. As I said in May of last year, and as I'll say again today, the cross-government, cross-public service effort that's gone into achieving the progress that's been achieved, particularly in recent months, and particularly in that critical period from May to September of last year, I think that's been extremely laudable. And a lot of people who work very hard with great devotion and commitment across the board to move things forward. I'd also, I think, reflect, as I sought to state in my opening remarks, that where we are now is with 5 recommendations of those original 48, which for differing reasons are not yet fully completed. But as we've noted, 2 of those, for many, many months now, we've recognised were going to have to be delayed for reasons beyond our control. So that was the question of the judge-only trials and the criminal procedure rules. A third, in relation to vetting, so sitting in my responsibility, we've made good progress, even this week, by launching the vetting of RVIPF officers. But we've got a bit further to go with the vetting of the other officers identified in the COI report, so prisons, customs, immigration. So we're not quite there yet on that one. Immigration, the amendment to the amendment just come to me for assent. I've just assented to it. So that hopefully will enter into force very soon. So not far off there. And public assistance, I know the Ministry are working hard to put in place the regulations to enable that change of legislation to become a reality. Formally, at the moment, it hasn't yet entered into force. So I linger on that in some detail because I think it's important to understand that within that headline figure of 5, there's quite a lot of detail which is very relevant, which gives a sense of how close we are to progressing in each of those 5.
Okay. In the area of you not seeing it necessary for additional powers for the governor, I know you would have deliberated a little bit on it with my colleague previously, but help us to understand. So we would have seen reasons by your predecessor, Mr. Rankin, who outlined what he thought were the reasons for him requiring or recommending additional powers. You would have reasons why you recommend it's not necessary. Could you compare those two and say the reasons why you would have come to this decision as opposed to what Mr. Rankin would have recommended?
Yes. Thank you, Kathy. I can only speak to my own experience. And obviously when my predecessor was here, it was a different context, different environment, and he would have made his own judgments, which obviously I respect. Based on my time in this role, and in particular based on the work that I've been engaged in relation to the Commission of Inquiry, it seems to me, it's clear to me, that where we have been most successful in delivering recommendations, in making progress, has been in those areas where we have, and I'm happy to say this is the rule rather than the exception, been able to achieve a very deep level of collaboration and partnership across all partners involved. My office, Office of the Premier, individual ministries, people outside of government have a strong interest as well. So that for me has been the most effective additional power, if you want to call it that. It's really achieving that sense of collaboration and partnership. And as you'll recall, over the course of last year, we put quite a bit of structure into that partnership. We established a single working unit where representatives from my office, representatives from the Premier's office could sit together and work through the detail of the particular recommendations. And that really drove progress. We had a joint reporting cycle, we had joint meetings. Even the action plan that we signed off in the spring of last year was one that we sent back to the UK jointly. So in my experience, that's what made the biggest difference. So, in drafting this review and looking back at that previous period of very productive working over many months, it seems to me that's the secret for continued success in this space, rather than additional powers for the governor. So, that's my proposition contained in the report that's going back to London. And obviously the Minister, Secretary of State, will consider that alongside all the other information that's being provided to them.
Mr. Adams, this is a follow-up to my second question, if you may allow me. So what we should grasp from this, based on your response there to that question, is that you have been having a really good working relationship with the Premier's office and those officers responsible for the implementations?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And we wouldn't be where we are today without that.
Okay, Mr. Adams, can I steal a third question like my others did? And this one has to do with the vetting process. It's commendable to see that it's going forward, but can you elaborate on what would have taken it some time to get on the ground, and what were the teething areas of that process that is now in train?
It's new. It's a new departure within the police force and within those other agencies that will come to be vetted. So, as with anything new, it takes time. Mm-hmm. And it's a process which, within my professional life, within the UK public service, within public services and police forces around the world, it's a standard practice. Anyone in a public role, particularly one which is a public security role, would go through a process of vetting to whatever degree. But obviously in this context, it's completely new. So it takes time to develop the correct procedures that are appropriate. It takes time to consult and discuss on those. But I think the time is time that's well spent if it gets us into a position where, as was the case yesterday, I believe, the Acting Commissioner of Police is able to formally trigger the process, circulate the forms to all of her officers, set out the steps necessary to complete the information that's required. So I wouldn't overstate the nature of the process. The process it's standard practice in police forces around the world and public sectors more generally. But equally, I would recognise that introducing this completely new into an environment that hasn't had this practice before, of necessity, requires the time and the attention and the care and the discussion and the consultation to get it underway and to do it properly.
Okay, and a follow-up to that, Mr. Adams. So in the process, just my curious mind is going, and I'm guessing that many persons would want to know. In the process of vetting, for instance, bank accounts, properties, and other valuables that police officers may have, is this a system that is set up now, set in a way that you do an assessment of what they have from a given period? We have officers within the force that would have been there for quite a number of years, I guess into the as much as 30 years. Would that investigation or vetting of their properties and stuff commence from a given period?
So I think, that comes down to the detail of the information that's provided on the form. Mm-hmm. I think, the parameters within the form are set out clearly question by question. There's additional guidance so that officers understand, whether it's finances, whether it's associations, family circumstances, the parameters that they're working within. And then obviously, those conducting the vetting will assess that information, and if there are points where they need additional explanation, they're there to be able to follow that up. I think the guiding principle for any vetting process, and specifically this one, but just as a general rule, is one towards disclosure and sharing information. This is not about catching people out. This is not about tricking people. This is about officers providing a clear picture of their circumstances, so that their employer, in this case the RVIPF, can work with them to make a judgment in terms of their ability to do their jobs without vulnerability to threat, to coercion, to blackmail. So that's the nature of the relationship. That's the basis upon which the information is requested. But the specific parameters, I think, section by section, are illustrated clearly on the form.
Who's conducting the vetting?
So the vetting program has been developed by colleagues from the UK Home Office, and they are putting in place a small team of vetting specialists who will actually review the documentation, do all of this completely confidentially. All of the information provided is managed very, very securely, and we've taken great pains to ensure the integrity of the information management systems.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Ms. Adams.
Thank you.
And I'll take a few questions from other members of the group.
Cindy Roseanne again, Guavaberry Media. Is past Commissioner Mark Collins in the territory and a part of the vetting team?
Say that again, Cindy. I didn't quite catch what you said.
Is past Commissioner of Police Mark Collins back in the territory and a part of the vetting team for the police?
Well, I'm certainly not aware of former Commissioner Collins's whereabouts, and wouldn't expect to be informed of those. But I can state very clearly that former Commissioner Collins has nothing to do with vetting.
Okay, thank you. Has the government ever discussed electronic surveillance of the borders with you?
In what
In
sense?
terms of border protection, control, in all of this, in terms of security for borders and everything that's going on with the review for police, immigration, police, everything, customs. Has the conversation of electronic or the subject of electronic surveillance as a subject come up from the government?
Over the time that I've been in the role, I'm not sure this quite answers your question, Cindy, but correct me if it doesn't. We've had a number of periods of discussion in relation to, for example, maritime protection, maritime security. So shortly after my arrival here last year, we had a team of UK experts from the Joint Maritime Security Committee who conducted a very thorough review of those questions over an extended period. And we're working with them to develop a model of, I'm not sure, electronic surveillance isn't the right way of describing it. It's something which would be closer to a radar-style monitoring capability. I'm not close to the technical details, so this is a concept that may still evolve. But there's an ongoing discussion to try to see if, in the light of that visit last year, there is something that can be done to help improve the capability of the islands to monitor, from a security perspective, traffic that's coming on and off the islands through the waterways. But as I say, I hesitate slightly over some electronic surveillance because that's, I think, describing something slightly different to what's in mind. As that discussion develops and as we start to approach the point where a concept for what could work in this very unique and challenging environment, then obviously there'll be fuller discussion and wider consultation of that. But I'd couch that very much within the long-standing work that's been underway in the light of the JMSC visit last year.
Okay. Is there any update on the request from the Premier in terms of the Minister of State appointing a Minister of State?
So the Premier submitted to me a request in relation to 4 roles. So 2 of those were Minister of State positions, to have the ability to appoint at Minister of State level, and 2 of those were Parliamentary Under Secretary of State, to have the ability to appoint at that level. So there's 4 nomenclatures involved in this. His request to me was to submit that request on to Minister Doughty in the FCDO, which I did. So the matter sits with him.
Okay. I have one last question. I have a couple, but I'll just make it one. Can you tell us what happened in the airport debacle? And given some eyewitness accounts, do you think you owe the public an apology given the level of your office in any way?
So up at the airport last week,
Yes.
as you'll have seen from the reporting, there was a delay at the check-in counter, which the counter staff resolved, and I was grateful to them for doing so and thanked them at the time. While that delay was occurring, a fellow passenger made a comment which wasn't appropriate and for which he subsequently apologised, and I accepted his apology. And that was what happened. Those were the circumstances.
And that's it. You hold no responsibility for any of it. Nothing that you think you should apologize for to the public.
So,
No?
Cindy, I know no particular request of that sort has been put to me directly. No complaint has been put to me personally. Obviously, if that were to happen, then I would totally discuss and reflect on that with whoever was bringing such a complaint or direct approach.
Okay, grateful.
Thank you, Cindy.
Sean Connolly, business editor of the BVI Beacon. You mentioned the second volume of the Law Enforcement Review, which was recently released, which gives the governor sweeping powers. Its recommendations would if they were implemented. It caused uproar in the House of Assembly. There was a unanimous view to send you a letter of objection and also one to the Foreign Office about it. Have you replied to that letter? And publicly, what's your response to the criticism in the House of Assembly, which was accusing you of a power grab? Is it a power grab?
Thank you, Sean. So just on the letter, as I explained earlier, I just received that letter. So it reached my desk yesterday. Obviously, I'll study it and consider it and then follow up accordingly. So that's the status of the letter. I think I set that out earlier. In terms of the recommendations of the report and your use of the terms power grab, I think it was, you said, this is a report conducted by an independent body, His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary Fire and Rescue Services. They have provided 375 recommendations, including the points that you refer to. We are now, I hope, starting a process where, working together collaboratively across all partners, we set about assessing those recommendations and developing an approach, a plan. Some will be more straightforward than others. Some will require technical adaptation. Others may imply a more far-reaching political or constitutional discussion. But this is a process that we haven't yet properly embarked upon. It's a discussion to come. And I should emphasise that HMICFRS is not me. It doesn't produce reports on my behalf. It is a highly expert, very specialised agency with many decades of experience in precisely this field. And as I said earlier, we have the benefit of that report. We have the insights contained within that analysis from which we can draw. And we should consider, discuss, do that in a serious way. and then come to conclusions in terms of how we move forward.
Okay, thank you. I didn't say it was a power grab because I'm neutral, but members of the House said it amounted to a power grab. So how do you respond to them, the elected members? Is it a power grab in your view?
So it's not just a question of my view, it's a question of the facts. The fact is it's a report that's been published by an independent agency. Flows from the Commission of Inquiry, was one of Sir Gary Higginbotham's recommendations. We have it before us. Now, I can't speak to how others perceive it, how others interpret it. People have their own points of view, and obviously they're entitled to those. But I've described to you my attitude towards the report and my intention in terms of how to approach it, which is through collaboration and discussion with all partners across government and beyond, looking at the recommendations as proposed, and then making a series of judgments and assessments in terms of how we proceed.
Finally, there was a large section of that report which was highly critical of the way money crime is being combated in the territory, and they seem to predict, and this is a UK-based report by His Majesty's Inspectorate, they seem to suggest that the Financial Action Task Force would put the islands on their grey list at their plenary meeting next month in Paris. There's a report in the Beacon today with experts suggesting that section of that report could actually now push the Virgin Islands onto the grey list, which is a international sanction. Do you agree with the findings of that report regarding the possibility of the territory going onto the grey list next month? And do you accept that going onto the grey list would be damaging for the territory's reputation as a financial hub?
So I think in terms of what may or may not happen at the FATF plenary in June, I mean, it's not something for me to anticipate or seek to second guess. Those discussions will take place in the appropriate form at the appropriate moment. And I think probably that's all there is for me to say on that matter at this stage. I'm not going to seek to sort of interpret or exercise a judgment on lots of other commentary about the approach towards the June meeting. We will see what happens at the plenary in June.
Would you accept, though, that a grey listing would be damaging?
So this isn't an area where I have a great depth of expertise. Countries, territories go onto grey lists, come off of grey lists. In what I've observed, the crucial factor is how a territory responds to that experience and the nature of what is expected of it during that period. And equally, crucially, how it engages in the run-up to any decision-making point. And in this case, as you say, that will be the plenary in June. So I'm not going to be drawn one way or the other, Sean, in advance of this. This is a process that has been taken forward very comprehensively, very diligently, initially through CFATF under the FATF auspices. There's been a lot of work conducted across government in response to those initial findings in the mutual evaluation review. A lot of credit due to people who have worked tirelessly to respond to those, and a magnificent effort, I think, across many government ministries. FATF has to fulfil its processes, so we wait until June and we'll see what will come out of that plenary discussion.
And your separate, some might say, dueling press conferences with the Premier today, the Premier and yourself doing solo ones. Are you really saying that there isn't any trouble in paradise?
So I wouldn't accept the characterisation of the press conferences as dueling. We just had two press conferences on the same day, so I wouldn't read anything into the fact that they're happening separately. And as I said to Cindy, I think it was, there's ample precedent in every direction. Sometimes separate, sometimes joint, sometimes simultaneous, sometimes staggered. So I wouldn't draw deep conclusions, Sean.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. And I have two, if I may be allowed. Governor, firstly, the Premier had said when we had the budget overrun of the $20 million that he was going to ask you to launch an investigation. Has that been done? Is it started? If yes, how soon will it be completed, or what stage it's at?
Thank you. So, in relation to the situation you describe, my understanding is that the Auditor General is taking forward an assessment of the circumstances relevant to that particular issue. Obviously, she conducts her work completely independently of anyone, but as far as I'm aware, that matter sits with her and work is underway.
So you were never requested to have a body do any investigation?
So we had a discussion around the time that the debate concerning this 20 million was current, and consideration was given to a number of ways to look into the facts and the history of what happened. At one stage, there was a discussion, consideration between myself and the Premier in terms of involving the internal audit department within the Ministry of Finance. And as that discussion developed, actually the Auditor General became the appropriate body to take forward that work. But as I say, she does so completely independently of any other branch of government. As far as I'm aware, that work is progressing, and no doubt she will submit her audit or submit her report at the appropriate moment.
Okay, I'll leave that at that. My other question is that of crime and getting crimes solved. We would have seen recently where someone who was listed as wanted being captured in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and particularly that while all murders or any death that would have been caused in ways it should not have happened brings us some serious concerns, but there is some strong sentiments to the murder of Jahphix Stout, him having been a U.S. Army veteran. There's so many questions surrounding how this will go now that we have the suspect in custody in the U.S. Virgin Islands. To the best of your knowledge, if you are aware in any way, is there any possibility where the U.S. can seek to try that case, seeing that Mr. Stout is one of their veterans, or was?
Kathy, it's a perfectly reasonable question, but it's not one I think I can make a comment upon, and one that I'm not informed to comment on either. So thank you, I won't be able to.
You was not briefed at all about the capture of the suspect?
So it's not appropriate for me, I think, to go into the detail of a situation like that. So there's nothing really for me to say, I'm afraid.
I'm only asking because we know security sits under your purview, and I don't think we would have seen coming out from the Royal Virgin Islands Police Force yet anything that alludes to the suspect, because a wanted bulletin was sent out publicly, and to this date we haven't seen or heard anything really other than any simple direct communication with the Royal Virgin Islands. So that's the premise on which I ask these questions.
Yeah, no, and I'm not saying it's an unreasonable question to ask, but I think it's probably better directed towards the RVIPF rather than myself, Kathy, I'm afraid. Sorry.
Okay, and finally, if you can give a quick update, we know there have been quite a number of issues surrounding the state of the prisons, and I don't think we would have heard recently any major substantial report or update as to what's happening there to improve safety and security, one for inmates and as well for staff and administrators who operate there.
Thank you very much. So yes, I'm delighted to say a few words on that. And as you know, the prison is a shared responsibility between myself as governor and the Ministry of Health. So Minister Wheatley and myself have a lot of contact and discussion in relation to the prison and the situation there. I mean, the prison, I think, is on a very positive pathway at the moment. It's an environment that's not without its challenges. And indeed, I mean, Sean and I spent quite a bit of time up there just recently, had an opportunity to see the prison at first hand and have a good conversation. So Sean will also have perspectives on the current situation there. Prison's overcrowded. You know, there are more people there than it was built for. And while the staff and the superintendent there are doing a magnificent job managing that environment as effectively as they can, it's got more people there than it was built for. And therefore issues of strain on the facilities, strain on the accommodation, they're all having to deal with day by day. But they're doing a magnificent job. As you might expect, the prison is a challenging environment, but it's one where the superintendent and his team, I think, have done a remarkable job in building more opportunities for rehabilitation of inmates there, and doing that in a number of ways. So through the appointment of a new counsellor at the prison, a new teacher at the prison, obviously the prison chaplain continues their important role as well. There is a steady building of the offer to prisoners to help them find a different pathway and not to reoffend subsequent to their completion of their term. At a very practical level, there are a number of facilities that are being developed slowly but surely. So there's an opportunity now for inmates to be able to assist with some of the carpentry and woodworking activities. There's a woodworking workshop now in the prison. Inmates themselves played a decisive role in helping to upgrade the secure gatehouse at the prison too, making it a much more fit-for-purpose environment to the benefit of staff and inmates and visitors as well. So a lot of work is being done, which is providing greater capability for constructive use of inmates' time, and also support to find pathways through to rehabilitation. As we've discussed previously, Kathy, the prison is an important element in the journey of anyone through the criminal justice and law enforcement system. And we need to ensure that if someone does fall into criminal behaviour, they do go through the justice system and they end up in prison. Prison provides them with opportunities to find a pathway out of that route and not actually contribute to perpetuating a cycle. So while prison, of course, remains a place where people have to face their sentences and serve their time, it should also be an environment where people have opportunities to find a different pathway in their lives. Just to pick up your final point as well, in terms of practical support, the Ministry of Justice in the United Kingdom, working with my office and with the superintendent, have been able to do a number of practical things to help ensure the prison is properly equipped for what it's there to do. So, for example, there's a very important program underway, which is refurbishing, replacing, upgrading all of the locks and keys that run through the prison to ensure that all of that very important provision is completely fit for purpose. We have also recently funded a full radio communications network as well, which is making a significant difference in staff's ability to respond to emergencies. You alluded to a recent one just now. But the practical difference that interventions like that can make, both to the safety of staff, but also dealing with serious incidents, is very significant. And there's ongoing work looking at other ways that the UK government, particularly through the Ministry of Justice, can assist. So that was a rather lengthy answer to your question, but I think there are challenges there. Inevitably there are challenges given
finances is one?
Well, I think finances are always challenges in the public sector, in any government anywhere around the world. But I think what I pay tribute to, I think, is the commitment and the creativity of Superintendent Kendall and his staff. He's got a magnificent team there who are doing the absolute maximum within the resources available to them to ensure that the prison is fulfilling its responsibilities in terms of being a place where people face their prison terms, but also ensuring that the area of rehabilitation is one which is developing, because that's the critical thing to ensure that people can be helped along the way to find a different pathway that doesn't lead to reoffending.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you to His Excellency the Governor. Thank you to members of the media for joining us today. The Governor's report and public feedback reports are now available on bpi.gov.bg. That's bpi.gov.bg. Under the Media Center, they are also now available on the Government of the Virgin Islands WhatsApp channel. Once again, I'd like to thank our viewers for joining us this morning as His Excellency the Governor, Mr. Daniel Pruce, delivered updates on the security of the territory, as well as the implementation of the Commission of Improved Recommendations. For the Office of the Deputy Governor and the Governor's Group, I'm Acting Communications Officer Jahphix Z. Adams. Thank you and good morning.